So, welcome guys to our latest edition of Leaders Insight. We are really fortunate and very lucky to have Neil today. Neil Harvey is a brand and marketing consultant, a creative brand and marketing consultant. Let me get that right, Neil. Thank you very much for joining us today, and welcome to IsoNation.
Yeah, you're very welcome, Nick. Really delighted to be part of this series. Incredible speed in which you've got this superb channel to market, and it's great to be part of the contribution. So yeah, great.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, that's down to the guys at Nifty Communications. I'm not going to lie. They're the guys at the PR and comms machine behind IsoNation. As you all know, it's a collective. We're trying to create some unity and some support in very uncertain times. And every episode is around getting some leaders' insight. Now, we're going to get some insights from yourself around the creative and brand strategies that people are employing on how to kind of survive what's going on with the corona situation. So before we go into that, it'd be really cool to kind of get some insight into what was the OMG moment for you when you realized that COVID-19 and corona was here to stay and was going to be a bit of a disrupting factor?
Yeah, do you know what? One of the things for me is that where in the last 2 years I've operated as an independent consultant, I've already sort of come to terms with this ability to adapt to collaborative working environments, to use technology to communicate into disparate groups, and I've got clients in the US, and you know, I think in my industry of lots of incremental touch points along a creative journey, whether you're devising a campaign or a strategy. It's not one of those sort of projects that you pick up a brief and you go away and you come back a month later. So you got this sort of big reveal. I think those days are gone where you're whipping off silk kind of cloths to reveal the wondrous work you've been doing. Everything that I'm working on with the way a brand is evolving or a project within a brand is evolving has superbly sort of close touch points. So in the last 2 years as a consultant, I've had to sort of adapt anyway on that from having the luxury of working within large advertising agencies in London. I've had to sort of adapt to say, right, well, how do I continue this sort of energy in a project, but also still have those touch points with the client? And so to answer your question, what was strange was I was kind of already doing what a lot of people are now doing. So for me, the aha moment was I felt that people were now adapting to my way of working and feeling more comfortable in shaping and transforming their business around a more independent consultative methodology, rather than me having to make any massive fundamental changes to myself. So my aha moment was seeing how big clients used to very traditional and arguably old-fashioned ways of working in the space of a couple of weeks had to completely transform their business overnight, and that was quite a shock to see in a way. And I saw this article the other day saying, you know, what in 2020 you went through massive business transformation. What promoted that? And it says, you know, CEO, CTO, or COVID-19. And I think it's going to be that people will say, oh yeah, our CTO strategy, and we've been thinking about it for years, and we implemented the business transformation in 2020. Actually, no, you were forced to make the business transformation in 2020, and it was probably because of this. So I think there's going to be a lot of retrofitting of this new world when the time comes.
It's a really good answer, actually, because I think because this is such a global life-changing moment, not just for individuals, but for commerce. I think it's going to be recognised from, you know, whether it's COVID-19 or it's Corona, this will be recognised in the history books. Yeah, I'll tell you what, commerce and beyond.
Yeah, the world got smaller in 2020. I mean, incredible in terms of when you think about it. I mean, in the last 5 years, you know, the briefs I've had with you know, like creative considerations in the brief, and it says avoid English or too European-centric messaging, or avoid too many US references, depending on how it falls. I think yes, there will be the geography for obvious reasons, and I'm sure we'll fall back into the similar behaviours. But the recognition of the globe as an operation, as a kind of a way in which we function in business. I know that sounds really cheesy, but you know,
I know what you mean.
There is a spotlight now on how businesses are cooperating globally, which is not really at the forefront. Normally it's more boring stuff, but behaviorally, in the recognition of different cultures and how we are adapting and how we have adapted, which will probably obviously be what we will be talking about hopefully in some months' time. I think that idea of making that world feel smaller, everyone will feel, and I think that's a positive thing for me, if I'm absolutely honest.
I agree 100%, and I want you to hold on that, because at the end of the interview we talk about some of the positives that will come from it.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I mean, in terms of when things just become a lot closer when people have got connected, and I mean, if people are going through a very similar situation all at the same time.
Yeah.
You can't help but be that bond being created. You can't help but being connected, and regardless of socio-economic, political differences throughout the world, everyone's saying, you know what, lots of people are dying. We need to collectively pool resources or work a way to stem this flow, and that naturally just brings a level of unity in itself.
Yeah, and I kind of have heard conflicting stories about people saying, "Oh, it's a real leveler," and I think I think in some instances, yes, it is, because everyone's going to recognise the situation we're in. Whether you're a celebrity, a company CEO, you know, that you're all isolating, and you're all kind of in the same boat strategically, as in terms of the instructions.
Indeed.
But it isn't a leveler in some instances, because you've got, you know, frontline workers, you've got people perhaps in, I don't know, we promise not to get too negative, but just as a reference around, you know, you've got frontline workers, NHS bus drivers, people in high-rise flats, people who work in supermarkets. You know, they are exposing themselves more than perhaps the luxury of the FD or the CEO who's just retiring to a very pleasant country house and is able to carry on their work business as usual. And I think there will be a less than favourable statistic in terms of the outcome of this, that will see that it perhaps wasn't the leveler that people kind of often talk about, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, you know, as we say, hindsight's a great thing. Time will tell, but a really interesting point there. But what I want to do is I want to focus on the one good thing to come. So make sure you've got your mind ahead of that question. So in terms of you work in, obviously you're a consultant. You're also a non-executive director for a number of organisations. You also work in a number of other consulting. You would have seen this affect everyone in different ways, and really what I'm keen to get from the conversation today is around how people are adapting, how important it is around brands, and how people are adapting those brand strategies to kind of deal with it. And we can talk around how that can evolve straight away, but I suspect there was an immediacy which was around what do we do now, and the big thing for organisations, and I speak from my own perspective and other MDs I'm speaking to, is looking after cash. Before we even look at we need to make sure that liquidity and cash will be king, as it always is, but through these tough times. Beyond the cash element, what have you seen people doing straight away to try and kind of either tighten the belt buckle a little bit, or just to make sure that they're ready to do, you know, put the sandbanks up essentially?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a bit of an exposure of companies that don't know who they are. Perhaps a company that's traded very comfortably, thank you very much, on services and transactional stuff that says, yeah, you want to buy it from us, or you want to use our service, or you want to kind of partner us on a particular business task. Yeah, we'll do it. Here's the price, and you're deployed. I think what now people are doing is looking. I don't want to get too kind of spiritual, but they are looking now at the identity and the culture and the purpose of those businesses a little bit more. It's not so much as obvious as saying, you know, yes, organizations need to think about their culture and what they stand for, not just as a kind of a task, almost akin to 15 odd years ago when companies were saying, oh yeah, we are an equal opportunity to employer, you know, almost as if that was a project to do, you know, that we're an equal opportunities. And now it's kind of the equivalent in 2020 is we're culturally aware of what we stand for and ethically responsible for everything we do. There's sort of an element of that and a similarity of that. So to answer your question, I think what people are kind of having to do differently is be accountable for the reputation of their organization, be a bit more accountable as leadership within that business. I'm mentioning no names of the big corporates and kind of businesses that have hit the headlines, particularly in the UK, around leadership.
I'm going to mention those names later, so don't worry.
Yeah. But some people, in a way, the spotlight's gone on them for how to not do it. And I think people have been learning very quickly on what not to do. But in a way, what is the right way to do it that is relevant to the business and the personality of that organization will be a question that hopefully people like me in the brand consultancy world will be given. And hopefully all the creatives and thinkers and writers and designers and digital people around the world will be given that responsibility to totally transform the way companies talk about themselves. And I think there could be not only some fantastic creative work coming out of this, but differences in it by industry, and even by the way we interact with companies, whether they be sort of online retailers or what have you, or even physical retailers when we're allowed to go back into the town centres. I think that's what will be the topics for transformation, I imagine, as a result of people coming out the other side of this.
Okay, and listen, in uncertain times, people look for clarity. They look for a way to be able to navigate the landscape, and that landscape has changed incredibly.
Chief execs. I'm 47 coming up this year. I don't mind admitting that.
So am I next Monday.
73. But few silvers in my
side of not having a barber during isolation. There are more guys coming in. I just look like a badger, but that's another story.
I was going to say that low fade is going to very quickly fade away.
Yeah, exactly. Turn into a different shade altogether.
Yeah. But no, I'm 47 coming up, and I think there's I always often refer to this as the generation of the stupidity generation, where we would just not grow up. And yet, when you now look at the chief execs that were the kind of old suited chaps, they grew up somehow. And when we were going through our early years in our 20s and 30s, they really looked like they were running companies. Whereas I think now, us lot, we don't know what the right thing to do around culture. I mean, 47. I mean, how old's Rishi Sunak? He's probably younger than me. I think still people are still trying to find themselves a little bit and sort of say, well, where's the manual? What do I do now? And I think why I raised that was that I think it's going to be a coming together of business leaders and representatives and figureheads of companies, and they're going to hold their hand up and saying, I don't know, but we will work together to find out. And as opposed to leadership leading and then assuming that they got all the answers, I think people will be sharing so much more and saying, I absolutely no idea how we define our culture and our business, and also how we authentically represent it. But we'll find a way, because we've got a good story to tell. And I think that's going to be a really interesting line of communications as well.
And and that's a really good way to kind of lead me to my next question, because we talk about culture and we talk about how redefining from a brand values perspective, because some people actually understand that more around the brand or the service or the product proposition before they think about the people that work in the business. From a brand value perspective, how important is I suppose surviving first of all, and then coming through the back end of Corona from a brand value perspective?
Yeah, and look, I'm sort of an eternal optimist pretty much with everything I do, and I kind of you just make a good point there in the word surviving. I mean, I'm notwithstanding anything we talk about in this interview, there are companies that aren't going to survive, and so as much as it's all very positive and enlightening to think about how you define your culture when we're through this, a lot of organizations will be just trying to define their business when we're through this. Their supply chain, their staff, their furloughed staff, which is obviously a new word in our lexicon that no one don't ever think that you knew what that word was before, because I don't think anyone's ever heard of what a furlough is. Some sort of an interesting jacket, perhaps. But no, I think there's going to be businesses that aren't going to survive, but let's hope those people who are in those businesses and even the leaders of those businesses come up with new ideas for that service that they're passionate about and they're delivering. But it's the fact that the service doesn't fit what society becomes, and I think brand value will be not so much related to if you like, the greengrocers you know, the guy with his arms folded and saying, you know, all our fruits fresh, you know, guaranteed. It's not about what the service guarantees in terms of brand value. So you recognize the brand and say, oh, they're good quality. We'll buy them. We'll buy from them. I think the brand value will be now a recognition of how a business or a service or even a B2B function, even something like, you know, a call center, that sort of remote call center function where you can run a campaign and they answer the phones on your behalf. Fairly invisible, but you will have that's a very personal one-to-one interaction between a customer and a call center operative representing the brand that has commissioned them to communicate on their behalf. That's going to transform, because it won't be now scripted conversations. It will be about briefing that call center and that team to say, well, this is truly what we're about. This is what our customers value, and this is as almost as personas who they are and what they will have experienced. And we as a business need to adapt and modify and authentically deliver our service to completely resonate with that new persona type. And that new persona type now has come through what is a kind of once in a, it's not even once in a lifetime. This is kind of, this is like, you know, all the superlatives that everyone's used already, all of those at this time, you know, that whatever their description is around that's what people have now got potentially at the front of their decisions around working with people and working with businesses, and like you say, furthering the brand reputation and value of what that company stands for. That's all up for grabs. That's all up for discussion now.
I agree. And you know what, just for those that aren't marketeers, in terms of personas, because I've been doing quite a bit of this, we're revamping our brand and marketing strategy. So just to explain what the personas are, because my understanding of personas is, you know, you've got different customers, and each customer has a different characteristic. You've got to make sure that you make sure your message and your delivery and your communication resonates with that certain persona or that characteristic, should I say.
Yeah, so I think what I've worked with personas from a recruitment marketing perspective more prominently, because unlike a consumer persona, of which is very valid, and if you think of behavioral marketing and media targeting, a persona there is quite, I wouldn't say easy to define for my media friends that may be watching. It's certainly more formulaic. It's more formulaic, because if you as an individual consume, you know, this media, you watch these channels, you like these brands, there are, by the nature of the way those other brands are marketed, associations to mean if you're interested in this, you might be interested in that, and therefore let's market that to that group. What I think, and you'll appreciate this as well, Nick, being connected to the sort of recruitment and employer brand and candidate experience world, is that when the life-changing decision of changing your career is the transaction, or is the equivalent of buying that next pair of shoes, you are responsible as an employer, but also if you're a consultancy helping within RPO, recruitment process outsourcing, running that model through from attraction, assessment, and placement, you owe it to the candidates to not paint a picture of what this utopian role is that they're joining is painting the picture, so that's accurate. But what I think employers looking to target by way of a persona are doing much more scientifically is they are really defining the characteristics of that individual, not just their consumer buying habits. And I think long answer again, sorry about that, in referencing,
cool, I like it.
in referencing what you said about personas, but I think the characteristics of personas and the definition of the imaginary individual named by gender, by race, and by characteristics could become a measure in how we go forward in looking to attract the right people for the right positions.
You know, and and again, that leads me on to the next piece that I wanted to talk about, which was, and from a recruitment perspective, listen, when there are organisations that have come out in the press when this is happening saying, I won't name the names of the organisations, we consider ourselves to be key workers and in a key sector, we're going to make sure we work. The other one was that we're going to keep these licensed retail places open. If we can't keep them open, you can always get a job at another high street supermarket now.
Yeah.
From an employee engagement perspective, and from a, my job isn't just to recruit, is to retain people, and that's the hardest part at the moment. Once we come through the back end of this, there's going to be clearly some brand tarnishing there and some company reputational issues there.
Yeah.
But more importantly, from an employer brand perspective, just give me some insight into what the landscape will look like when we finish, and how organisations can improve their employer brand based on everyone going in the trenches together.
Yeah, so there's sort of two parts to that question that sort of perked my imagination, and one is that when we talk about brand, we're if you like, we're in the trade, we're behind the curtain. We know how the mechanics work of leadership, strategy, commercial ambition, shareholders. And then instead of publicizing that, you lot, can you sort of mash it into a really sexy looking thing and reshape it so it looks really beautiful and wonderful? And then we don't need to talk about the fact that we need to make profit for our shareholders, and we don't need to talk about margin. And in a way, we're now sort of stuck between the two, where the world now knows that profit and growth and consumerism and capitalism is the kind of driving force of lots of organizations. The specific two that we are alluding to in this is almost exclusively that. They get all of that buttoned up, irrespective of culture, brand, employee reputation, just all of that good stuff that we want to promote first, and then put the commerciality behind it. Those organizations get all of that stuff militantly locked down, and then stick a bunch of smiling people on the front and get them to behave and perform. And in one of the cases as well, drive down supplier buying margins so that they can pass on a price cheap attraction strategy to the consumer. So I think where change might happen, and then the reason why I said that we're sort of behind the curtain and know about the workings, is I do sometimes think that, albeit that I went to art school, so forgive me, I've got no sort of like economics background or anything to do with philosophy, but I'd like to think that people would see the value in local. They would see the value in knowing a person behind a brand. Now, forgive those who work at those large organizations, they're a person too, and there will be, and they are the people that have perhaps been told by their chief exec to go and get a job somewhere else during this time. That's got a sting, and as much as we recognize the people who work in these places and don't begrudge them, because in the way they are sort of a byproduct of the sort of victim in a way, what I'd like to think that we do as people is recognize the value and importance of where we spend our money, and the organizations and businesses that we spend our money on. Try and just recognize the importance of what it means to them, and what you are as a customer to them, and what they are as a supplier to you. And if there's some sort of story behind it, or some sort of purpose, again, and I kind of overuse that these days, but I think that's what's going to be another change. I think people are going to promote their distaste for certain organizations by where they spend their money, and I hope to goodness, in some of this charitable stuff I've seen going around a local level, people hold that dear and say, afterwards, yes, I do want to go to in the Newbury, and I will name drop them, the Globe, fantastic couple run dog friendly pub, trying their hardest to overcome the battle with large brewery managed corporations that just destroy the competition on price. And as I said to a friend the other day, and I know price is everything, I'd rather have 2 pints where every sip feels like I'm helping, rather than 4 pints for the same money, where it's just a little bit sour. If you know what I mean. An analogy there, but that's a kind of that's what I think might come of this in people's spending decisions, and where they spend their money, and that directly relates to the reputation, good and bad, as in what's coming out of this these incredible times.
I agree incredibly, and I'll disagree to some point. Listen, economic situation at the moment is relatively bleak.
Yeah.
And so price is really important. I think as we come out of this, the price is important, but I think as we come out of this, I hope there really is a shift towards more local. Because the same where we live in Worcestershire, the same we've had, our butchers are making home deliveries, our fresh produce places making home deliveries. We just make it so easy for us to just go and do a bulk shop in a retail giant. And actually, the food is better, the service is better. We don't mind paying a premium because the quality of the food's better. So I think there's going to be a shift, and it might not be an immediate shift because it might be that everything's tight for a while. But as soon as that spending power resumes, and as soon as people have choice, consumers aren't fickle anymore. They understand the messages that marketers are conveying to them. They understand where there's a link, and it resonates long term. So this will leave a bad taste in people's mouths, and I think. The Harvard Business Review did an article on branding through coronavirus. And one of the big things they said was associate your brand with good. And if you're going to say, at the moment, no one should be selling to anyone.
No.
What you should be doing is saying, listen, how can we help? How can we open our network? And how can we can assist?
Yeah.
And anything where you've got those brands that will remain true to themselves and will associate with good. And I heard the other day that I don't know if you heard that there was an organisation, I can't remember the name of the organisation, that had allowed it's 100 people that they furloughed to go and work as volunteers within NHS.
I saw that.
Those kind of success stories, people will recognise that when people are looking for jobs, it's no longer is engagement has never been related to pay. It's the least of the evils. It's more around do they feel that they buy into the values of the business? Do they feel that they buy into the behaviours of the business beyond values and behaviours? They feel like they're part of it. Do they feel like they're truly engaged? They feel, and listening to all the success stories or the brands that are associated with positive things, that's going to really resonate. And I think that alongside the pricing bit, that's where candidates go, I remember those guys. Yeah, they did work before. And I think it's going to be incredibly important.
I'll tell you what is going to be interesting. However long we are through this interview, when you slide the bar across to these minutes now, in 2 years' time, whether all of this, what we've just said, is utter gibberish and everyone's fallen back into their behaviour, or as we mark this moment, we could say, just at this little moment as we're locked in our respective houses, it's true. It's turned out to be true. The idea of even the word corporate or the idea of commoditizing a service that is steeped in personal human interaction, like the publican, the landlord of the public house that's amalgamated to cookie cutter, horrendous buying consortium type setups, slap them in every town, and then just hammer the price down, 0 hours contract, and they'll come flocking. If that's all happening now, and we are in 2022, and this has just popped up on our timeline, then fine, we had a damn good go. But if actually now people are saying, blimey, remember the days when those big corporations fell because of the reputation that they set during the coronavirus pandemic, and the damage that did to even the notion of we'll make them come and buy from us because they won't be able to resist, to the detriment of Griffin's Butchers on the Bridge, the Globe in Newbury, the market, which is shrunk every single Thursday, and Saturday in Newbury as I was growing up as a lad, and I'm sure you've got it up your way as well. You see this shrinking, and then I don't know, maybe in this sort of 2 year time, hello 2022, we do see a completely different way of looking at the decisions we make and who we buy from and what we buy and how much we buy. Who's throwing stuff out now? It feels like every carrot's important, right? And yet before, I mean, we're probably chucking loads of food out without knowing it, rather without thinking about it,
So true. I think that's been the biggest thing. and you only really appreciate something. And the old adage, again, I don't want to get too spiritual, but you don't really appreciate anything till it's gone.
Too right.
And throwing food away. My household is pretty good around throwing food away. But now we're using stuff out of sell-by date for fun because you're not sure.
Yeah,
you're not sure where you're going to get.
Yeah, I even like a brown avocado. It's sort of like it's a bit like an aged whiskey. It's sort of there's some sort of bit of body to it, slightly fermenting.
Yeah.
No, I totally get it.
But you know where I'm going, and I'm hoping. Listen, we'll have that chat in 2022. Well, we'll have lots of chats before then, but we'll have that chat in 2022. And I think we're not going to get to a utopian situation. No. Commercialism will, there's an ounce of capitalism that will always be here. And but actually, if there's just more choice, if there's just more choice, and if the high street is a place where that model still works, where the supply chain is driven low, you can understand it because the cost of the high street existence is expensive, and it still stays there. That's fine because when we go on that high street, we know what we're going to get. But I think more rural, I think more local. If we can get that back. All it requires is we have the customers; they're just all going to one place. And instead of sharing the love, essentially. So I think there's going to be, hopefully, there's going to be a bit of a shift. I think.
And so actually, go on. Sorry.
No, go on.
I was just saying, just as a final point on that. You look at the speed in which businesses have to adapt when the customers stop coming. And I know the customers stop coming for lots of business for a completely different reason. But if people now think, blimey, they had to U-turn that principle fairly sharpish, albeit because of coronavirus. But what if that albeit decision was because everyone took a stand to say, we're not doing that anymore. We're not going to do that anymore. And, perhaps those that will get organizations to feel that they aren't in charge of our decisions as consumers. We're in charge of where we consume, and they will have to adapt if we decide that we're not going to go there. And that could be a quick thing. It could be done in 2 weeks if everyone's on board.
Wouldn't that be nice if we could turn it? Wouldn't that be nice if we could turn the tide on that? What was the song they tried to get to #1 to beat the manufactured? Was it Rage Against the Machine?
Yes.
And they got it to #1.
Yeah.
We haven't seen much of that since, have we?
No.
I think that level of people power to beat the masses and the
anti-Simon Cowell, wasn't it?
100%. I think we're going to see a little bit more of that, and I think it's easy when things are great and we hide behind corporate machines and everything's fine. No one really wants to question the status quo. But I think we're in a situation now where we're questioning everything.
Yeah,
we're questioning our daily existences, and I think on the back of that level of questioning, if you give people a vehicle to make some choice, who knows what can happen?
And actually, even looking at IsoNation as a concept. I know this is as a result of isolation, but as a metaphor, and I don't want to get too creative on you, but if isolation is a metaphor for independent thinking and you feeling like you're on your own past COVID-19, maybe IsoNation is or could be adapted to show that a lot of thinking and the principles of something show that you aren't on your own. Whether you be an independent worker or a part of the gig economy, or as a consumer, feeling like they should be doing the right thing, but perhaps feeling that they're just one in a million that will make no difference. It might be that the idea of IsoNation, the way that this kind of theory evolves, could be about mobilizing change and reacting to things that perhaps seem fruitless, and as we sit here now, in this series, whilst in lockdown, I'm sure there are some people that are really suffering right now, and then they're in their book of business drying up, they're independent working, they're one of those kind of dividend paid director of a limited company, it's kind of falling through the gap type person, and
you just mentioned me. You just described me.
Same here. Me too.
You've just described me. So again, that'll be another conversation to have in 2022, and hopefully.
Yeah. And
maybe you're still in the garden.
Yeah, and maybe my COVID-19 protest beard would have been shaved off. If you see it gone, you know that things are on the up. That's all.
Things are on the up. And talking of things on the up, I'm really keen to make sure, and we've kept it pretty positive in terms of, listen, we're not painting a picture that isn't accurate. It's a difficult time, it's bleak, but actually we've got to look to the positives. And I put the phone down to my telecoms provider today, I put the phone down to one of my key clients yesterday.
Yeah.
And from a brand perspective and a marketing perspective, both of those guys, including myself now, are currently investing in our marketing. We're using this as a great opportunity to reevaluate, reset, recalibrate, get the message correct, get the branding correct, because there will be an opportunity for everyone to come out the blocks when this dies down. If you were to give any one piece of advice before we go into the closing question, if you give one piece of advice to someone who doesn't necessarily have the budget but has the time, because we've got time at the moment, and with creativity on digital marketing and digital marketing spend arena being relatively cost effective, what advice would you give to somebody?
Well, if again you look at this period from a business sense, a bit like the domestic time we've had at home, I bet you every single household at the side of their house has got a pile of stuff that they need to take to the tip when it reopens. and my little prediction is, if you're in refuse recycling business, prepared to be inundated. I don't think you'll get to the tip for 6 months. But using that in a business context, what have you cleared out, metaphorically speaking, in your company? And I don't mean people, crikey. I mean more the baggage of what you felt you needed to hang on to, what you stood for, and what your business was, your website. How do we describe ourselves? What are our services? I think there's going to be a clear out of that confusion and hoarding of a bit of everything that mashed together within your identity of who you are as a brand and what you stand for becomes a noise. You don't really know the people, and you don't really know the services, and you're not really sure about the identity and all of that. If you peel back all of that sort of clutter, I think my advice would be to take this opportunity cost effectively. I think is a good time to buy services. Everyone, including all the guys I work with at Media Fusion and all of our partner businesses, are desperate to support, keep the lights on, support businesses and reduce their rates. And if the work out of that could be help us identify who we are and what we stand for, now is the time to come out and be post COVID-19 ready, to not hit the kind of 9 a.m. on that Monday morning and see if all your customers are still there and carry on where you left off. Actually, not that. Prepare to go into that new period, find better tuned and better clear as to what you are and what you are as a business. And if you're chief exec, C-suite level, and I do a lot of consulting with boards, where not coaching as such for them and how they behave, but a recognition of the connectivity between every employee within that organization and how they impact the reputation of the business and the experience a customer has. And that's the same, as we sort of go full circle, as the experience that the employee has and the candidate has when those businesses are looking to attract talent again in the future. And I think so the idea of a decluttering of who you are and what you stand for, a number of reasons, is a perfect opportunity now to get to kind of really address that and get that straight. So that's what I'm I would love to help, but of course, but that's really what I see as a really important point right now.
And listen to that, and listen to the passion about how you delivered that response. I know you definitely like to help, and people will be able to reach out to you and find you on LinkedIn. Sure. I've looked at your LinkedIn profile, pretty impressive LinkedIn profile. And I suspect you'll probably get a few calls on the back of our interview today. Hopefully. In closing, I want to keep this. I want to leave the last question I'm asking all of my leaders on the Leaders Insight program is there's two things. I'm going to ask two things. So the first one I'm going to ask you is, when do you reckon we're going to come out of this, and when do you reckon we're going to the shoots of stability will start showing?
Okay, so quick insight into my head, super fast out of that. So right, Neil, how do you answer that one? Do you sort of pretend you are kind of one of these Facebook things like, it's going to be years, or do you go with what you heard on ABC News during the Donald Trump kind of daily update, where he's saying Easter Sunday would be nice, and it's kind of it's a combination of, well, who knows? Yeah, and I think if I have absolutely no idea as in terms of coming out of a pandemic. I couldn't even begin to say what that would mean. But let's say there is I think first and foremost, I think the idea of easing the social distancing, I do think that's a long way off. I mean, I can't imagine them, just for the sake of sort of dampening any social unrest, saying, oh, go on then, maybe you could go to the parks again. I think there's going to be quite disciplined on that. So on a pandemic level, I think I have absolutely no idea. But I think when this will end, when we see it will end from our kind of day jobs, will be, first of all, when people start doing and coming forward from what I just answered your previous question in, saying, do you know what, actually, yeah, I recognize we're in a dated position as a business, or even as an individual. You know, what I'm doing is dated. I'm going to change the way I do it. So seeing an end, the beginning of coming out of it, will be when I see more people and perhaps more interest and more commentary on various social and media channels in talking, you know, specific to this industry, in talking about people taking the time to change what they're about. If we start hearing more of that, I think businesses will be looking to come out of it. But I guess there is also the economic kind of wave, if you look at it, and I'm not sure which way the camera's going, but it's sort of like that from China across to America. So as we sort of flatten across Europe, you're still going to have this massive hump in the US, because I think that 6-week gap where Trump said we've got it under control and the Chinese virus isn't going to affect us is probably going to get down in history as one of the most horrendous understatements ever. And that is going to hold America's
and the rest and globally,
and therefore globally,
they're so integral.
And so you know, as much as there's entertainment in watching American news stories around the kind of absolute divided opinion on Donald Trump, I just do think, because they are state by state, there's an independence of, like, you know, like, we'll try and look after our people. I think the nature of those mechanics is going to mean that's going to last for ages, and then because that's going to last for ages, there might be a bit of a knock-on across there. You know, another long answer to your question. I do apologize.
No, and listen, we're not aiming to put anyone on the spot with that, because it's an almost impossible question, but it's always really nice to get the insight we've had from everyone so far is, as soon as social distancing, as soon as lockdown starts getting reduced, that's when people can start interacting. I think the next thing now will be testing. As soon as the testing kits come back in, that would enable anyone who's had it to be able to start working. And if we can start building from a skeletal resource in most organizations week by week, and the testing gets there, then it's going to happen. So your question mirrored my answer and mirrored the answer of the other interviewer as well. So the last question will be, and this is where I want to get your take on, from name one positive thing that's going to come, because there's and again, not to make it too spiritual, I like to see the gift in everything. There's a gift in everything, good and bad. What is going to be the one good thing that's going to come out of this situation that we've been in? And obviously we're in the treacle right now. When we come out of that, things will, hindsight, will look a little bit better, and it won't look as bad as it does daily at the moment. But what will be the one thing?
Local. I just think that, I think community, and I think local. I've just glanced at my power in my laptop, which might die, so I don't want to, which is like really worrying. But local will be my passing word.
I love that point. You know what's a new point that we've had out of all the interviews, and we touched upon it in quite a bit of detail. I've really, fingers crossed, 2022, we look back at it and we see the landscape change in terms of retail, in terms of we need to get back to it, and it's viable. The only reason it's not been viable is a cost issue. You know what? It's not about cost, it's about value. Yeah. And once people get their heads around that, I think those days will come back. Listen, it's been, I want to say from the bottom of my heart, it's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed the interaction, Neil. And I'm hoping all of the guys that watch this, we've got quite a strong following, short space of time, based on Nifty's TikTok PR and comms skills. I'm hoping they're going to like it. It's going to resonate with lots of people. You've delivered it with a lot of passion, with some really credible and relevant insight, but with fun as well. And that's what IsoNation's all about. So thank you very much, Neil. We'll all be in touch with you real soon, and have a great week, a bank holiday weekend.
Pleasure. Thank you, Nick. Really enjoyed it. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.